You know, in economics, you get these beautiful, elegant theories that seem to explain everything perfectly. But what happens when those theories smash head-on into messy reality? Well, it happens a lot. And today, we're diving into one of the biggest examples of this, a real economic mystery.
And it all kicks off with a question that honestly affects every single one of us. I mean, why do countries trade what they trade? And more importantly, what does all that mean for your job and your wallet? The answer is, well, a little complicated, and it all starts with this really powerful theory. So let's get into it.
All right, so to tackle that question, we've got to look at this big idea from economists called the Heckscher-Ohlin theory. Now, stick with me here because it makes a really logical, almost perfect prediction about how global trade is supposed to work.
So let's paint a picture here, a classic example to make this super clear. Imagine you've got two countries. First, the US. It's what we call capital abundant, meaning it's got tons of factories, advanced machines, that kind of stuff. Then you've got a country like India, which is labor abundant, lots of people. Now the theory says, pretty simply, that each country should lean into its strengths. So the US would specialize in making capital-intensive things, like heavy machinery, and India would specialize in labor-intensive things, like textiles or cloth. Seems logical, right? Do what you're good at.
Okay, but here's where it gets interesting. Let's look at the chain reaction in the US. Once trade opens up, everyone wants those American-made machines, so demand shoots up. The machine industry starts booming, but maybe the cloth industry in the US starts to shrink. All the resources, the money, the focus, shift over to making machines. Suddenly, you've got a shortage of capital, because everyone's trying to build factories, and a surplus of labor, from those old textile mills. And this is the key takeaway. The return on capital, think profits for the owners, goes up. But the price of labor, wages for workers, actually goes down.
And at the same time, the complete opposite is happening over in India. The world wants their cloth. Demand just skyrockets, so their cloth industry expands like crazy, sucking in all the resources. Now they've got a shortage of labor, everyone's needed to make cloth, and a surplus of capital. So what happens? You guessed it, wages for the workers in India go up, and the profits for capital owners go down.
And all of this leads to the theory's big, beautiful conclusion. It's called factor price equalization. It's a fancy term, but the idea is simple. The theory predicts that over time, through trade, wages in the US and India will start to meet in the middle. Same for the returns on capital. Basically, trade should eventually make the price for the same job and the same investment equal, no matter where you are in the world. It's a really powerful, really neat idea.
But, like we said at the very beginning, a theory is just a theory until it meets the real world. So what happened when somebody actually checked the data? Well, this is where our perfect story gets messy.
So to recap, we've got this clean, simple theory. A country rich in capital, like the US, should be exporting goods that use a lot of capital. It just makes sense. But does it actually happen? Is that what the real-world numbers show?
Yeah, not even close. In 1951, an economist named Wassily Leontief decided to check the numbers for the U.S. in 1947, and what he found was, well, it was shocking. The United States, arguably the most capital-rich country on the planet, was actually exporting goods that were more labor-intensive than the stuff it was importing. It was the complete opposite of the prediction. This bombshell became known as the Leontief paradox, and it basically blew a hole right through that elegant theory.
So what gives? Was a whole theory just wrong? Totally useless? Well, not exactly. This paradox sent economists into full-on detective mode. They started searching for clues to figure out what was really going on. Let's follow the evidence they uncovered.
Okay, clue number one. This is a big one. It's something Leontief's test just didn't account for. Human capital. See, his analysis only looked at physical capital. Machines, factories, things you can touch. It totally ignored the value of a skilled workforce. The education, the training, the know-how. I mean, let's be real. Labor isn't all the same, right? There's a world of difference between an assembly line worker and a PhD-level aerospace engineer.
And when you look at the data through that lens, the picture changes completely. You can see it right here. Countries with a ton of skilled workers, like the US, tend to export a lot more manufactured goods. So maybe the paradox isn't a paradox at all. The US wasn't exporting labor-intensive products, it was exporting skill-intensive products. That changes everything.
All right, our second clue is a little bit trippy. It's a concept called factor intensity reversal. This is when the very same product can be made in a capital-intensive way in one country, but a labor-intensive way in another. And this is a huge problem for the theory, because the theory just assumes a product is either one or the other, period.
Here's a simple way to think about it. Apples. Growing apples is pretty flexible. Now, in a country with high wages like the US, it's just cheaper to use a lot of fancy machinery for harvesting. That makes apple growing capital intensive. But in a country with low wages, it's way cheaper to just hire a bunch of people to pick them by hand. That makes the exact same process labor intensive. So, who exports the apples? The theory breaks down. It would say the US should export its capital good, apples, and India should export its labor good, also apples. See the problem? It just doesn't compute. And the bottom line here is pretty serious. If this kind of thing, this factor intensity reversal, is common, then the original Hex or Olin theory just flat out can't predict trade patterns accurately. It's a major, major challenge to the whole framework.
Okay, the last clue is way more down to earth. Transportation costs. I mean, the original theory lived in this perfect little world where shipping things was free. But in reality, of course not. You've got ships, fuel, trucks, insurance. It all adds up to a real cost.
And the effect of these costs is pretty simple, but it's a big deal. Without them, you get one single global price for a product. But with them, you get this wedge between the price the seller gets and the price the buyer pays. And that little wedge is enough to stop prices from ever truly equalizing across the world. So that beautiful idea of factor price equalization, it just can't fully happen in the real world.
Okay, so let's take a step back. We've got human capital, these tricky factor reversals, and real-world transport costs all poking holes in the theory. So is it just garbage? Should we just throw it out?
No, not at all. It's not about the model being useless. Think of it as the foundation. The Heckscher-Owen model gives us the fundamental framework, the basic logic for understanding how a country's resources shape what it trades. Finding its flaws doesn't mean we toss it in the trash. It means we make it better. We build on it.
And this diagram really shows you the whole picture. You've got the core idea right there in the middle, making its basic prediction. But then you have all these branches coming off of it. The real-world messiness, the paradoxes, the assumptions that don't quite hold up. The theory isn't the final answer. It's what forces us to ask the smarter questions. Questions about skills, about technology, about all those real-world costs. It's the starting point of the investigation, not the final report.
All right, we've been on quite a journey here, from a perfect, elegant theory to a much more complex, messy reality. So let's put it all together and test your understanding of this whole economic mystery. So here's a final thought for you. If someone tells you a country is rich in capital, should you just automatically assume it exports capital-intensive goods? Well, after everything we've talked about, the answer has to be a resounding no, right? Now you know the smarter questions to ask. You've got to ask, okay, but what about its human capital, its skilled workers? Or could this be a case of factor intensity reversal? Or even just, what are the shipping costs? Because as we've seen, the simple, obvious answer is almost never the full story. And that's what makes it so interesting.